Morning.
Good morning. Who is this?
It's Michael.
Oh, it says Elizabeth.
No, it's what is called in the business a hand me up. It was my daughter-in-law's computer, and it was given to me many years ago when I was in the hospital, and I never changed the name. So, and then I forgot to bring my camera downstairs this morning, so you're stuck with.
I just changed your name.
Now it says Michael Muterick.
I know, I just changed it.
Wow, does it change it on my computer too?
No, I think it just changes it for this particular Zoom.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Resume recording for posterity because why not? If we're doing it in this format, let's learn together and stuff like that. So, I have my coffee, iced coffee this morning. Does everyone have their coffee?
To you.
Yeah, l'chaim, l'chaim.
L'chaim.
We're gonna do a little bit of learning, a little bit of latte. Just want to check in. How's everybody doing? Everybody doing okay?
Yep.
Fine. Doing fine.
Well, I'm grateful that everyone is able to be here this morning, and let's do a little bit of learning. Sound good?
Mm-hmm.
Sounds real
So
good.
What I'm going to do is share my screen because I can do that. Boom. Okay. Today's lesson is called Touching Dirty Things. This week's Parsha is Vayikra, which is the central book of the Torah. Now, just a few words about Vayikra that I feel like I have to because I'm a rabbi and I like to share what I know. So the way that biblical literature works, unlike sort of modern Western literature, is, and this is sort of across the board in ancient Near Eastern literature, is that the climax or the most important part of a work happens to occur in the middle of the work. So that is to say, if you look at the book of Exodus, for example, Revelation at Sinai happens in the 20th chapter out of around 40 chapters. So it's actually interesting the way that the Bible is formatted. The most important work is the center. So this week we are starting the book of Leviticus in our weekly Torah reading cycle. And it is ostensibly the most important work because how many books are there in the Torah? 5, right? And this is the third, so therefore it is the central book. It is quite literally the climax or the most important, and it is the least engaging narratively. It is rife with laws about an esoteric and anachronistic sacrificial system that really does not resonate at all with our modern lived Jewish experience. It talks about purity and impurity, which is something that gives us sort of pause as moderns. What are you talking about, purity and purity? It speaks about a God that is immanent in sort of theurgic matters, and that if we do X, then God will do Y, which is sort of difficult for modern theologies to grapple with. It is not necessarily the easiest text to sort of get in there and understand. It's not like Genesis where you have this beautiful narratives and even competing narratives where you can compare them. It's very legalistic, and much of it reads like a manual for priests.
And it's the book that my Talmud Torah skipped.
That's interesting because it's actually an ancient rabbinic tradition, and this dates back to early rabbinic Judaism. So we're talking about 2nd century Common Era. That you specifically start teaching children with Vayikra, right? You don't start with Genesis where you have all these stories that are great for kids. You don't even start with Exodus where there's like this national narrative. You specifically start with Vayikra because that's the theological meat of Judaism. Which, if I was a 5-year-old and they were talking about, cutting the fat off the kidney I was like, what's a kidney? You know, like, what? Like, are you talking about a bean? What's happening here? So it is a difficult text to sort of get into, but once you get into it, I have to say, it is probably one of the most fruitful and theologically stimulating texts. Now, it takes a little bit of work, and we're going to do that work together today. And there was a verse in the first parsha in Vayikra, which is titled Vayikra, deals with sort of the basics of the sacrificial system, and who sacrifices what and what constitutes the different types of sacrifices. And it's really concerned with this idea of tameh and tahor, tameh being impurity and tahor being purity, and this idea of tuma and what tuma is the noun for impurity. So if you somehow come in contact with a substance that carries tuma, then you become tameh. You become impure, which invalidates you from participation in certain areas of ritual life. Now, what's interesting, my professor at the seminary and congregant in Teaneck, for those who were paying attention earlier, Dr. Benjamin Summer, taught me that the things that can become the things that make you tameh are things that are distinctly human and not divine. So what are the things? What are those things that are distinctly human and not divine? Just shout them out. What can make you impure according to Judaism?
Dead bodies.
So dead bodies, that's classic. A dead body carries tuma, and the tuma, the reason that a dead body carries tuma, right? How is that antithetical to the divine, let's say?
Dead.
It's dead because God can't die, right? Living, death, that's not, God is sort of outside of that binary. Does anyone have any other ideas? So what are the things that can make you impure? That you touch?
Blood.
Clean piece.
So blood. Interestingly, it depends on what blood you're talking about, because there are certain bloods that when they're used within the temple service, they can actually have purifying properties.
Right.
So if you bleed, but it's more than just bleed. It's any sort of human emission. So bleed, if you are sick or something like that, there's a case for you to not be pure. Okay. Anything else?
Menstrual blood.
So menstrual blood. So why is that make you impure?
Yeah, well, you can't read from the Torah.
So you can't. Yeah, that's true. You can't read from the Torah, but that's more of a symptom than the reason why it makes you impure. God can't procreate, right? That is sort of fundamental. So, and that's also mirrored with ejaculate. So, I know that Michael, you can giggle with that if you want, but
Giggle.
But
He knows his audience.
the rabbis sort of took the whole menstrual side of it and went crazy. But in Leviticus, it's very clear that if a man has a nocturnal emission or even has sex, he becomes ritually impure and needs to be purified. So, yeah.
Unclean beasts.
So unclean, if you come in contact with an unclean beast, which is to say a beast that if you kill it is not kosher, yes, that also is a problem. If you come in contact with a carcass, it's not just a human dead body, but like you're traveling on the road and there's a dead donkey on the side of the road. If you come into contact with that carries tuma. So clearly, I don't know if Jeffrey was looking at the text we're looking at, but a beast is part of it. So Jeff, why don't you read? Does everyone see the screen that I have shared with you?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Okay. Jeff, do you mind reading?
Sure. Do not mind at all. Or when a person touches any unclean thing, be it the carcass of an unclean beast or the carcass of unclean cattle, or the carcass of an unclean creeping thing.
Okay,
The
so
fact- Yep.
an unclean thing. So this is sort of everything's equal. What's an unclean beast? Let's name an unclean beast.
Pig.
Lion.
A pig, great. A lion. If you came across a lion carcass, let me know.
In South Africa.
If you come across a cattle carcass, great. Okay, well, you know what that is. What is a creeping thing?
Spider.
No.
Centipede.
A frog?
More like a lizard.
A snake?
So a frog,
Gecko.
a snake, a gecko, something like that. We're
Oh,
talking about creepy crawly, icky things. Maybe a spider, but I don't think that's
Not insects.
I think that we're dealing in a world in which insects are sort of outside the realm of this category, if that makes sense.
So my note here says that the list of 4 unclean beasts are in chapter 11, verses 4 through 7.
Well, we're
Yes.
not there yet.
Well, but that the rabbis kind of go back and forth.
Yeah. The rabbis believe Ein Mukdam Mu'achar b'Torah, that there is no before or after in Torah, that all of Torah is sort of contemporaneous and should be read at the same time, which is great, except if you've never read it before. Right? You can't apply something that you haven't read yet to something that you're currently reading. But okay, yeah. So unclean, creepy things. The Hebrew word, I believe, is sheretz. Here, let me highlight it for you.
I can tell you what Ibn Ezra says are creeping things.
I can also do that.
Mhm.
I cannot do that.
Okay, what does Ibn Ezra say?
The 8 kinds mentioned in our text: the mole, the mouse, the great lizard, every variety, the gecko, the land crocodile, the lizard, the sand lizard, and the chameleon.
Yeah, so lizards. It mostly means lizards or creepy crawly things that sort of are considered gross, I would say, by the rabbis. Anyway, so if you touch any of these things, what happens?
You're unclean.
You are tameh. You are now in this category of impure, right? Right. And then what it says, and the fact has this. Can you keep reading, Jeffrey?
And the fact that it's escaped him, and then being unclean, he realizes his guilt.
Okay, so what are we talking about? What's this?
If you're about to go do something holy and you are unclean, you have a problem.
Yes, but say you touched it yesterday, right? You decided to poke the dead frog with a stick or with your finger, right? All of us who have children know that that's not outside the realm of possibility. You decide to poke it, and the next day you're like, oh, I'm going to go to the temple and I'm going to go offer a sacrifice to God. Well, you can't offer a sacrifice to God unless you're pure. And really, right now we're talking about priests. We're not really talking about the rest of us. So if someone touches that, and then they go and they're going to go do temple service, but they forgot, he realizes his guilt. What is he supposed to do? He's got to make a sacrifice in order to expiate it. Great. Awesome. But there's a chance that you forgot to do it. You forgot all about it, and you actually went and encountered and actually did work in the temple while you were tameh. Like, what do? Does that invalidate all of the sacrifices that you then facilitated as a priest because you were inadvertently tameh and forgot that you had to purify yourself?
It's hard to see why this doesn't resonate with a modern audience.
Right?
I know, right? I know, right? Okay, so
I guess this is pre-Pasteur.
this is definitely pre-Pasteur. It's also pre-Purell.
This verse, the whole verse begins with an or, and the second verse begins with an or. And so, should we look at what comes before all this?
It's a larger context of what happens when someone accidentally does something, accidentally enters the temple service with being, or sort of engages in the temple service by accidentally being tameh, right? Not intentionally saying, ha ha ha, I touched a dead frog, so therefore I'm gonna go and do this thing. But saying, what happens if you accidentally do something, and if you accidentally have touched this thing, forget about it, and then engage in it, and then it sort of outlines it. And the biblical law is case law, right? So I think the lawyers in the room can sort of help me a little bit better with this. But there's no like sort of overarching value statement of you need to be pure. It's if you're impure and you've done it accidentally, then. But if you're impure in this case, there's always exceptions to everything. So you have to sort of extrapolate what the value is that they're getting at in that moment. And it seems that they're making it very clear that it's okay, and there are ways, no matter how you became impure, to therefore purify yourself, even if you forgot that you were impure. And it doesn't necessarily invalidate. Because if that's the case, the entire system would fall apart, right? If you have priests that are constantly impure, then and can't somehow, and because they're human beings, they forget to do something, and they forget to purify themselves because they were up all night with the baby or whatever it is, just for example. And they
That never happens.
they find themselves unable to sort of do the work that needs to be done, or they've done work that required them to be pure, and they were inadvertently tameh. How can they sort of retroactively make it okay? Right? That's sort of what we're dealing with in this moment. And I think that the next verse was really the verse that sort of resonated with me when just thinking about what's going on in the world today. Jonathan, do you want to read it?
Sure. From where or when he touches?
Or when he touches.
Or when he touches human uncleanness, any such uncleanness whereby one becomes unclean. And though he has known it, the fact has escaped him, but later he realizes his guilt.
Okay. This is, okay, so whatever uncleanliness, so lichol tumato, for all of the tuma that someone might have encountered. Rashi goes on to say, this is intended to include in this law the uncleanliness resulting from touching men or women who have a flux. So there's this this acknowledgement that you could unintentionally bring in the tuma of this flux, of this disease, of this whatever it is, into the temple. And what do you do once you've done it? Friends, we're living in a time where we don't know, right? We don't, just like they are looking at this, we don't necessarily know if we've even come in contact with some sort of, let's call it tuma, some sort of, what is it? Contagion. Is that the word? Contagion?
Contagion, right?
Contagion. And it's scary. It's a really, really scary thing. I think that the thing is that as this progresses, right, the priest needs to do what when he realizes his guilt? What do you have to do in order to expiate your sin now? Like, what needs to happen?
Sacrifice is my guess.
So that sacrifice is the last step. The first step is you have to realize it, then you have to tell someone.
Yeah, you have to admit your guilt.
Yes.
So the Rambam's laws of tshuva start off by saying the first way to do tshuva, especially now in a post-temple world, is you have to admit it to yourself, admit it to everyone around you.
Yes. Acknowledge it.
Acknowledge it. And I think the scariest thing for all of us as we make our way through this time, that for better or for worse, we don't know when it's really going to end. And especially with the whether or not we're quarantined or we're allowed out or whatever that means. Truth be told, having spoken to some infectious disease doctors, this isn't going away anytime soon. We're not going to be in a place where it's not, and it's scary. And the best thing that we can do, can everyone hear me? It says my internet's
Yes.
unstable.
Yes.
The best thing that we can do is to reach out and share with the community if and when it happens, and not panic, but say, hey, this happened to me. I happen to have caught this. I hope that no one else does. And sort of owning it. I don't necessarily know if guilt is the way to put it, or tamet or tuma is the way to put it, but I just think that there's an interesting parallel here, because I think there's I question when I read this text how much of this is the priest sort of willingly forgetting or living in denial, if that makes sense.
Like, you have to get on with it at some point. You know what I mean? I mean, what strikes me about the text is, right, it's from a technical standpoint, it's sort of anachronistic, right? I mean, well, like particularly the way they treat what we translate as leprosy, but what no one believes was leprosy, right?
Okay.
Later on.
Yeah.
But it's sort of notionally still very relevant, right? You've got to find a way to sort of delineate between clean and unclean. You got to have a mechanism for transitioning between them. And you also have a way to sort of, as you just said, kind of forget, to kind of get past it at some level, right? All very relevant today.
Yeah, but I think that the question is how much of it is willful ignorance too, right? Like, I don't want to acknowledge this because this is hard, right?
Right.
And I think that's if that's what's happening, then that's not necessarily good, because ultimately the priest who has come in contact with one of these substances needs to expiate their sin. They still need to purify themselves and go through the process of purification, even though they sort of engaged in acts that weren't necessarily kosher as a result of their impurity.
We do it today, though. Like, you know, we come home and we're all freaked out about germs. So we pull out a Clorox wipe and we wipe down our phones and we wipe our hands off, and then we pick up the container of the Clorox wipes that has the stuff on it that we were just wiping off, and we move that around. I mean, like, you at a certain point, you have to sort of, you could drive yourself crazy, or you know, you're either creating a surgery center in your house and cleaning everything all day long, or you do the best you can and you move past it. I mean, that's sort of a takeaway I'm having here.
Yeah, I think that there's definitely a piece of it, and there's like admitting, like, oh no, maybe I shouldn't, maybe I messed up there, right? Like, I think that's also a piece of it, right? Because he's not doing it intentionally, but there's like sort of an ownership of, oh wait, I didn't do exactly what I was supposed to do when I was supposed to do it. And I think that that's a hard realization, especially if we find ourselves living in ignorance or willingly ignorant or denying. I think that this is just a fascinating text for today and what's going on today. And this idea of sort of transmitting, because if you are tameh, you can pass on your tuma to somebody else. It totally sort of is proto germ theory, that once you get infected with this stuff, you can infect somebody else. And it poses some questions as to how do we expiate it today, and what do we do in order to sort of move past it and move beyond. And I think that what we're doing right now is the way to do it. We need to sort of stay where we're at and follow what the health professionals are saying, and study some Torah together, and maybe drink some coffee.
For me, it begins later today with, unfortunately, giving away my land crocodile. Who knew?
You have a land crocodile?
Definitely not.
I just don't know. You have so many surprising things about you. That like oh, I make handbells. I'm gonna buy a kazoo. Whatever. So I'm just not
Gecko, Jonathan.
What's that?
What about your gecko?
My gecko, I'm no comment.
I used to own a lizard. I had a lizard.
Did you?
Yeah. Bearded dragon in high school.
Oh man.
It was wonderful.
Rabbi, there's also a line about being a witness. And I see on the internet all these people that are upset about people that are out playing basketball and running the track at Lower Merion and all this. And they complain about it on Facebook, but they're not reporting it to the right people. And so the problem just keeps getting bigger.
Yeah, I think that's also like a question as to what's our personal versus communal responsibility in this moment, and where does that begin and end? Communal policing is difficult, right?
The Lower Merion Police posted something yesterday, I am told, I don't have Facebook, but on Facebook basically saying, please stop calling us and telling us that people are walking by your house.
Right.
Right. I think that there's also like, there needs to be a recognition of the fact that people do need recreation. I don't know how smart it is for that individual to be going and touching playground equipment, let's say.
Right.
But I mean, I can't control what another person's going to do. All I can do is control what I'm going to do.
Oh, in my neighborhood, the playground equipment's taped over.
Yeah, they've taped it all off.
Same here.
I didn't check ours, but Simi keeps asking to go to the park, and it's heartbreaking. You know?
And yet, you do need somewhere to walk around. I mean, there are lots of people on the Kinwood Trail. I think if you're keeping a distance, they're saying that that's okay, but probably stay off the monkey bars, right?
Yeah, I think that's the point, right? Like, there's a difference between.
Here's our pet crocodile.
Please, crocodile
Jonathan,
bars.
is that yours?
Crocodile bars, yeah.
He's grown since you put him in water and he just grows.
It was for the kid.
We're taking care of them until they come back.
I have to say, getting out to walk the dog is
kind of
great.
slimy. So.
Well, you've surely seen the memes of all the dog pictures where the dogs are like, all right, enough already, enough with the walks.
I'm not giving you my paw.
Well,
I'm dying.
There's also like the memes where the dogs are like, the happiest creatures are the dogs because everyone's
Everyone's home with the dogs.
Yeah.
Right.
Problem is, though, when this is over, the dogs are all going to be strong and ready to walk 9 times a day.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm curious to see what society looks like post this, but I think it's gonna. I'm not sure that we're in the clear just yet. So
No.
Far from
That we're ultimately going to be fine because we're always ultimately fine.
Exactly, Jonathan.
yes, I think that's going to happen, and this is just the truth of the matter. A lot of people are going to get sick, and I hope that people don't die, but there's a good chance that a lot of people are going to die, and that's
And I
scary.
think this is going to be a learning curve. I think we're going to learn things that, like using the Zoom and how we can use it through synagogue life after this, and how we can use this.
Yeah, I also think it's interesting how, and I've said this before, but how technology and our phones and our computers form a wall, or when we have the access to physical sort of contact, they form a wall between us and other people, and yet they are the main connector in this moment, right?
Mm-hmm.
As opposed to being this distance between us, it's the only way that we can even see each other's faces.
No, this is the major connector now.
Yeah.
I mean, the good news is we put our best people on it, right? There's lots and lots of scientists working on it, and human ingenuity always saves our butts. So
humanity will survive. That's not a question. I just hope that the death toll is as small as possible, and I think that's sort of what the biggest concern is.
Yeah.
Right.
And be mindful of our weakest community. There are some people out there that being at home alone, or being confined is really very difficult. And keep these people in our hearts and prayers.
Well, more than in our hearts, keep them trying to make calls to people that that are either in the older generation or living alone, or whatever you can do to just reach out to them.
So I think we are making calls. I mean,
no, I know. I'm just saying, I know the congregation is, but if you know someone that's, not on the board that's making a call to you that lives down the street that you wouldn't ordinarily call, try to do that.
I
or
also
even a letter in the mail. I mean, to get a piece of mail is like, whoa, that's cool. Yeah.
I think it's interesting because in the ancient world, you had this idea that you could spread your tuma. Excuse me. You could spread your impurity, but you couldn't spread the purity. But it sounds to me like there are ways in which we can spread purity or kedusha or holiness today you know, and it seems like that could also be infectious in its own way, right? If you look at all of the ways in which different companies have, you know, yeah, Bacardi making hand sanitizer or something like that, or
Right.
people
think
selling.
Dogfish Head. I think even Dogfish Head is turning beer into sanitizer.
That sounds cool. It's
That
gotta be a
you
lot more
like.
alcoholic than beer normally is.
Yeah,
but,
your 90-day IPA sanitizer.
We, the manufacturing community in Philadelphia, of which I'm a part, has really pivoted its whole infrastructure to help with this stuff. There's a mailing list where they're saying, can anybody make this kind of doohickey? You know, can anybody make the tube that connects this to that? And many, many, many companies, even some that were shut down, have pivoted their capacity over to make stuff to help here. It's been amazing to watch.
Crazy Aaron Enterprises. Crazy Aaron yesterday announced that they've converted their plant to making hundreds of gallons of hand sanitizer for local hospitals and needy areas.
I read
Could they
that.
send me some? Because I can't find any in any of the stores downtown.
No, it's all sold
That's
out.
all gone, Gordy.
I read that they're doing it in conjunction with a local distillery.
That's
Yep.
correct. That's correct. And I'm sure, Gordy, if you want to buy 100 gallons, they'll sell it to you.
And the thing is, they can't get the little bottles that like the regular size bottles.
They are working on that, but their primary goal is to sell it to the hospitals, who would then put it in their own little containers.
Yeah.
So they're making them by the gallon. So Gordy, I don't know if you want a
They're
gallon.
making them by.
Well, we have
100
90% isopropyl alcohol. As a chemist, I know what to do with it. But you can't get the aloe vera to turn it into sanitizer because that's not available either.
They're making it in 100-gallon, 125-gallon vats, converting a lot of their factory line. And if anybody wants to read the press release, email me and I'll forward it to you.
Good for them.
Larry, your
Go
hand
up
was
to
up.
them.
Yeah.
Larry, I saw your hand was up.
Yeah, that's right.
Oh, okay.
All right. I gotta go to work, guys.
Okay. Have a good day.
So,
Jeff,
Rabbi, as always, thank you for
joining
setting
Have a
this
good
up.
day.
Yeah,
Everyone's
Yasher
Thank
Koach. Yasher Koach.
Thank you.
So, just a friendly reminder, tonight, Minyan at 6, Rabbi Yanoff will be teaching at 5, a very important number.